Rent was due. Groceries were gone. I opened a notebook and started budgeting. No job. No backup plan. Just a binder, some beans, and a calculator from the thrift store. That notebook became my lifeline. Week by week, I built a life that actually fit. This is what rebuilding looks like, quietly, powerfully. Smart Saver Saturday. Full episode now on Dollar by Dollar. Watch the full story. I cut my expenses by 70% after a layoff. The printer made a final mechanical groan before falling silent. Rachel didn't even reach for the paper right away. She stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop. The screen's glow painting her face in a dull blue wash. Her apartment was quiet except for the low whir of the space heater in the corner and the click-click-click of her upstairs neighbor's pacing dog. She finally reached forward and picked up the paper. It was smooth and warm, a termination notice, officially printed on the company letterhead. It wasn't a surprise, not exactly. The layoff rumors have been circling for weeks. But hearing your manager say, "We have to let you go," and then reading the sterile HR language in black and white, well, it carved a pit in your gut. She laid the notice down next to the receipts. They were everywhere, scattered across the dining table like a paper graveyard. Grocery slips, impulse buys, Amazon boxes long emptied. $42 at Trader Joe's. $18.75 on hand soap, dish soap, and candles at Target. $11.23 on coffee, twice in one day. She meant to organize them last weekend. She hadn't. Now she had all the time in the world. Rachel stood and walked to the kitchen, pulling the last bit of oat milk into her coffee. It was bitter, but she didn't reach for sugar. Instead, she sat on the couch and pulled the fleece blanket over her legs. The heater clicked off. The apartment fell silent. For a moment, she let herself sit in that silence. Let herself panic, just for a minute. She thought of her rent, $1,285 a month. She thought of her car payment, $387.44. The insurance. Her credit card balance, creeping towards $7,300. She thought of the $42 sushi dinner she had treated herself to just last week. It had felt like a reward for making it through another stressful quarter. Now it felt like a mistake. She picked up her phone and opened her banking app. The numbers hit her like cold wind. $211.77 available. That was it. No savings. No backup. No one to call for help. No severance. Her lease renewed in 2 months, and utilities were due Friday. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she felt dizzy. But then, something strange happened. The panic didn't grow. It shifted. It sharpened. She stood again, went to the kitchen, pulled a notebook from the junk drawer, cleared the dining table, pushed the receipts into a pile, then laid out a clean page and wrote 3 words across the top in block letters. Need. Want. Stupid. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. One by one, she went through every receipt, every transaction, every decision. She wrote down the amounts and labeled each one. Need groceries. Rent. Car gas. Want. Streaming services. Brunch. Skincare. Stupid. Delivery fees. Impulse buys. That $78 sweater she never wore. By the time she was done, the page was filled with scribbles, arrows, exclamation marks. Some lines were underlined 3 times in red pen. She leaned back in her chair. The space heater groaned back to life. The receipts rustled slightly from the breeze. That's when she whispered to herself, "I've been living like I still had money. Not like someone who was trying to build a future. Not like someone who was preparing for an emergency." She had treated her modest income like it was permanent, like the job was guaranteed. And now, that illusion was gone. She closed the notebook and walked to her bedroom, pulled out a canvas storage bin from under the bed. Inside, old budget books she'd abandoned, unopened credit card statements, a folder labeled bills to sort. She brought it back to the kitchen and dumped it all out. Piles of paper spilled across the table. It was overwhelming. But this time, she didn't flinch. For hours, she sorted. She found 3 unused gift cards, a forgotten refund check for $18.17. She made a new spreadsheet, wrote down every debt, every bill, every monthly charge. Her Spotify subscription, gym membership, that digital magazine she forgot she was still paying for. Then she started canceling things. Click. Goodbye Hulu. Click. Goodbye FabFitFunBox. Click. Goodbye, premium Canva account. She cut $290 in monthly expenses that night. By midnight, the apartment was cold again. Her hands ached. But she had a plan, not a full one, but the bones of something stronger than panic. She would call her landlord tomorrow, ask about a payment plan. She'd research forbearance on her student loans. Maybe talk to the credit card company about freezing interest. Maybe, if she could find the courage. She went to bed with a notebook beside her pillow. For the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. The next morning, the sun pierced through her dusty blinds like judgment. But Rachel felt different, clearer. She boiled 2 eggs, made toast, and skipped the coffee shop. She wore an old hoodie, tied her hair up, and walked to the nearest library. It was 10 blocks away. She usually drove, but now every gallon mattered. Inside, she claimed a corner desk by the window, the kind no one ever fought over. She opened her notebook and began searching. How to apply for unemployment, frugal living blogs, Reddit forums for people surviving layoffs. She read everything, took notes, scribbled phrases like zero-based budget and no-spend month. She spent the whole day there. By 3 p.m., she was watching YouTube videos about minimalism, one after the other. Not the sleek White House influencer stuff, the real ones. People living with 50 items. People who quit $90,000 jobs to live on $20,000 a year. People who had been broke, just like her, and found peace by living with less. It clicked. Not just the saving, not just the budgeting, but the why. Rachel didn't just need to cut expenses. She needed to cut the noise, the consumer trap, the false urgency of must-haves, the spending that filled up loneliness or boredom or the silence of a night without a partner or a plan. She needed to shrink her life to something she could carry, something she could control. On the walk home, her fingers were cold, but her mind was warm. She passed a vintage shop she used to stop in all the time, the place where she'd spent $34 on a ceramic vase she didn't need. She didn't even glance inside. When she got home, she poured everything she'd learned into one sentence. I'm going minimalist, not just to survive, but to rebuild. The sentence scared her a little, but it also lit something in her chest. This wasn't rock bottom. This was reset. The cardboard box sat by the front door for 3 days. It wasn't that Rachel didn't know what to do with it. She knew exactly what it was, the beginning of her new life. But beginnings, like endings, have a strange kind of weight. And for 3 days, Rachel tiptoed around it. The box was labeled in black marker, sell/donate. On top was a dusty air fryer she hadn't used since that New Year's resolution to cook at home more. Below it, a pair of heeled boots that never fit right, 3 unopened self-help books she bought during one of her Amazon binges, and an unused yoga mat that still had the tag on it. The mat made her cringe. She had imagined herself as one of those early risers who meditated and journaled on the balcony. But the balcony had mostly just been a smoking spot for her upstairs neighbor, and the journal never made it past page 2. Still, the box stayed put, like a quiet dare. Each time Rachel walked past it, she felt the heat of old choices staring back. Money spent on things that didn't fill the gaps she was trying to close, loneliness, anxiety, self-doubt. But what did she do now? Regret wouldn't pay the gas bill. So on the 4th day, she moved. She zipped up her coat, one she'd bought from a thrift shop last winter for $9.99, and carried the box down 3 flights of stairs, the wind snapping at her scarf like a flag in retreat. She wasn't sure if she was more embarrassed or empowered. Maybe both. The resale shop was 7 blocks away, a hole-in-the-wall place that smelled like incense and old denim. The woman behind the counter didn't look up right away. Rachel placed the box down and waited. The woman, name tag read Marcy, finally glanced over, pulled on a pair of fingerless gloves, and began sifting through. She didn't say much, just the occasional. Rachel kept her hands in her pockets, watching. After 5 minutes, Marcy stood upright, brushing off her jeans. Store credit or cash? Rachel blinked. Cash. Marcy nodded and rang it up. $34.50 for what we can take. We don't buy books. Rachel nodded back. No haggling. No protest. She accepted the bills and folded them carefully into her wallet. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. And that was her new measurement. Better than nothing. When she got home, she stared at her living room. Really stared, like someone seeing their space for the first time. The piles of throw pillows, the 3 sets of measuring cups, the shelf full of candles. So many things she thought would make her feel what? Safe, fancy, settled. She took a deep breath, got a laundry basket, and began loading it. One by one, the non-essentials vanished. The decorative serving tray, the extra lamp, the impulse buy live, laugh, love sign from a clearance bin. It had always embarrassed her anyway. She wasn't just decluttering. She was deciding who she wanted to be from this point on. She created 3 piles. Keep, sell, donate, and a 4th one too. Maybe. That pile was the trickiest. It always is. That night, Rachel found a used furniture resale group on Facebook. She posted pictures of a barely used TV stand, a coffee table, and a rug she didn't love. Within an hour, she had messages. The next day, someone came for the TV stand, paid in cash, said it was for their college kid. Rachel smiled and helped them carry it downstairs. That was $45 more into the emergency envelope. That's what she was calling it now. Not savings, not a safety net, just the emergency envelope, an actual paper envelope on her kitchen counter. Tucked inside was every dollar she could scrape together. Money from reselling, refunds, even spare change from jacket pockets. She'd written on it in marker, breathe. The transformation wasn't overnight. Some nights, she second-guessed everything. The apartment felt empty, too quiet. She'd find herself scrolling online out of habit, hovering over add to cart just to feel in control. But she didn't click. She closed the tab, walked away, made tea, and in that quiet, something began to happen. She heard herself think. She noticed that her anxiety, the ever-present hum in her chest, started to dim. Without the chaos of clutter, without the push-pull of purchases, she started to feel something she hadn't felt in months. Agency. It wasn't power. Not yet. But it was the first step toward it. 1 week after the layoff, Rachel created what she called her no-buy rules. She wrote them on a sticky note and taped it to her fridge. Rachel's rules. No new clothes unless replacing something worn out. No takeout unless sick or grieving. No spending after 7 p.m. No spending out of boredom or emotion. Every dollar must have a job. They weren't revolutionary, but they were hers, and that made them powerful. She stuck to them. Not perfectly, but faithfully. When her cousin invited her out for dinner, she said no, and invited her over instead. They made lentil soup and watched reruns. Her cousin was surprised but didn't judge. They laughed about their broke college days and how they used to split cereal for dinner. It felt nostalgic and real. Rachel realized then how much she had been equating treating herself with spending money. But what she missed wasn't the sushi or the wine bar. It was connection, and that cost nothing. One morning, she opened her closet and saw it, really saw it. Half the clothes hadn't been worn in a year. Some still had tags. Rachel sat down and made a rule. If she wouldn't wear it in the next month, it was gone. She kept 3 pairs of jeans, 5 tops, 2 jackets, 1 pair of sneakers, 1 pair of boots. Everything else went into bags. She dropped them off at the donation bin near the grocery store. The bags were heavy, but she felt lighter. She looked up at the sky and smiled. She was doing it. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly. And that was the difference. She was no longer living under the illusion that more stuff, more spending, or more stimulation would save her. She was saving herself. 1 box at a time, 1 decision at a time, dollar by dollar. The library smelled like old wood and morning. Rachel shuffled in just as the double doors unlocked, the hinges squealing faintly like they hadn't been oiled in years. She smiled faintly at the elderly librarian at the front desk, the one who always wore chunky turquoise jewelry and spoke in whispers even when the place was empty. She didn't come for books today. She came for silence. Her laptop bag was heavier than usual. Not from tech. That was still the same thrifted Chromebook she bought 2 years ago, but from notebooks, receipts, and a packed peanut butter sandwich wrapped in reused foil. The plan was to stay until she understood her finances inside and out. No more avoiding. No more vague guesses, or it's probably fine assumptions. She needed to see her entire life on paper. Cold, unflinching, honest. She settled into a back corner seat, pulled off her coat, and laid everything out in rows like puzzle pieces. 1 legal pad, 1 budget notebook, her bank statement printouts, a highlighter, her phone, on Do Not Disturb. This was the battlefield, and she wasn't going to blink. She started with fixed expenses, Rent, $1,285. Car payment, $387.44. Insurance, $92. Utilities, average $160. Phone, $55. Internet, $65. Total, $2,044.44 per month, before food, gas, or anything else. Rachel leaned back in her chair. She exhaled through her nose. Her unemployment was $1,420 a month, a $600 shortfall. Every single month. She circled a number 3 times hard. That's when she made the list. She wrote at the top of a fresh page. Must cut, $600 minimum. Under it, she began exploring options. Could she break her lease? Move somewhere cheaper? Maybe. But moving costs money. First month, last month, a truck, boxes. It wasn't realistic yet. Could she sell her car? Take the bus? Possibly. But she needed it for job interviews, groceries, occasional visits to her mother. Still, she started. A future maybe. Then she turned to the variable expenses, the ones that fluctuated with her habits. She began scribbling. Groceries, $450. Dining out, $120. Gas, $90. Streaming, $42. Subscriptions, $18. Personal care, $55. Impulse, untracked $100, $200. It was like looking at bruises. She circled groceries and added a note. Target equals trap. Go with a list. Aldi only. Then another idea hit her. A spending freeze. She had read about it in one of the minimalist blogs. A hard reset where, for 1 month, you buy nothing outside of essential living costs. Not even a latte. Not even a small treat. Nothing. Rachel underlined the idea, then drew a box around it, then circled the box. It terrified her, which is how she knew she needed to try it. She flipped to a new page and titled it, February Spending Freeze Rules. No takeout or delivery. Groceries only from discount store with written list. No Target runs, thrift store browsing, or boredom errands. No clothes, beauty, books, gadgets. Cancel all auto-renewing services. Free entertainment only, library, walks, friends. She stared at the list. Was it harsh? Yes. Was it impossible? No. She thought of her kitchen, now stripped down to beans, rice, canned tuna, and some frozen vegetables. She thought of the old exercise videos she could stream for free. She thought of the tea bags she'd hoarded during the pandemic. She had everything she needed. Maybe not for comfort, but for survival. She flipped to yet another page and wrote in large block letters. This is not a punishment. This is a strategy. And then, in smaller writing below, pain now, power later. That evening, she made a meal plan. 7 dinners for under $25. She'd found the blueprint on a Frugal living subreddit. Chili with lentils and frozen corn. Egg sandwiches with roasted potatoes. Stir fry with rice and whatever veggies were cheap. Oats for breakfast. PB&J for lunch. Repeat. It wasn't gourmet. It wasn't fun. But it would keep her going. And strangely, it felt like control. The next morning, she walked to Aldi with a cloth bag and a calculator. The store was cold and the fluorescent lights buzzed, but she was focused. She picked up canned tomatoes, black beans, a bag of onions, and store-brand pasta. She skipped the pre-packaged snacks, the bottled cold brew, the fancy cheese. Every item had to serve more than one purpose. Total at checkout, $18.17. She handed over 20, placed the change in her coat pocket like it was sacred, and walked home in the cold with her hood up and her thoughts buzzing. She had done it. 1 week's meals. Under $20. That night, she made lentil stew in a beat-up pot, scribbled her expenses in a notebook, and streamed calming music on YouTube. For free. She ate at the table. Slowly. Without checking her phone. Without noise. And for the first time in months, the food didn't taste like shame. It tasted like progress. A week into the spending freeze, she hit a wall. She was tired. Emotionally, physically. The kind of tired you can't sleep off. Her body ached from walking everywhere. She missed the soft relief of ordering a coffee and sitting somewhere warm. Missed the impulsive joy of a $5 eyeliner that promised reinvention. And worst of all, she was lonely. Budgeting doesn't silence the part of you that longs to be seen. So she did the one thing she hadn't done in weeks. She reached out. Want to hang? She texted her old friend Danny. They used to meet for wine and apps on Tuesdays. The ritual stopped after Rachel lost her job. She'd felt too embarrassed. Like failure had rewired her social worth. But Danny replied in seconds. Yes. Come over. I'll make tea. Rachel walked 2 miles to Danny's place with her emergency envelope tucked into her coat like armor. She didn't touch it. They sat on the floor and talked for hours. No spending. No shame. Rachel told her everything. The receipts, the spreadsheet, the freeze. Danny listened, then said softly, "You're doing what most of us are too scared to even look at." Rachel blinked. "You think?" Danny nodded. "You're not just cutting back. You're cutting through." That night, Rachel wrote in her journal, "It's not the lack of money that hurts. It's the shame we wrap around it. But shame dies when you speak it. And tonight, I buried some." By the end of the month, the numbers told the story. She had spent just $624 total, a 68% reduction. She hadn't hit her $600 goal exactly, but it was close enough to taste. Closer than she'd ever been. And more than that, she had changed. Her mind was clearer. Her space was cleaner. Her habits were slower. She had stopped bleeding money. Stopped numbing pain with purchases. Stopped pretending the next Amazon box would fix anything. She was facing her life, eyes open, hands steady. That night, she took out the envelope labeled Breathe. It now held $267 in cash. Not much, but hers. She sat at the table, lit one candle, the last one she allowed herself to keep, and whispered a single sentence. "I'm no longer afraid of less." She smiled, took a deep breath, and blew out the flame. Rachel woke before the sun. The apartment was hushed, draped in that pre-dawn softness that only those who rise early ever really know. Her breath curled faintly in the air as she stepped onto the cold hardwood floor. The space heater had clicked off sometime during the night. She didn't reach for her phone, didn't scroll. She stood still for a moment, letting the quiet surround her. Then she walked into the kitchen, poured hot water over a reused tea bag, and wrapped both hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. She was about to do something radical. She was about to audit her own life. Not just the money. Everything. The cupboards. The closets. The drawers. The forgotten corners where half-finished versions of herself lived. The baker. The beauty queen. The DIY dreamer. Each had left artifacts behind. Gadgets. Tools. Trinkets. And she was ready to ask them all one hard question. Do you serve me now? Not someday. Not when she got a new job. Not if she lost 10 pounds, or met the right guy, or moved to a better apartment. Now, if the answer was no, it had to go. She started with the bathroom. There was something oddly symbolic about it. The place where you wash yourself clean. Where you face the mirror each day. Where you mask and moisturize and pluck and scrub and pretend you're in control. Rachel opened the medicine cabinet and stared. 3 half-used face serums. A night cream that gave her a rash. 7 tiny bottles of dry shampoo. Expired aspirin. A beauty box subscription from 6 months ago, unopened. She emptied it all onto the sink. One by one, she picked up each item, turned it over in her hands like an archaeologist studying remnants of an extinct version of herself. She was stunned by the silent promise each one had once carried. Confidence. Clarity. Youth. She tossed most of it. What was left fit in a single shoebox. Toothpaste, a brush, 1 moisturizer, a razor, a tiny vial of rose oil she genuinely loved. She slid the box under the sink and stared at the cleared shelf. It looked almost sacred. Then came the kitchen. This was harder. The kitchen had always been her aspirational space. She'd imagined dinner parties, cozy fall baking nights, meal prep Sundays. But the truth? She ate standing over the sink most nights. The oven hadn't been used in weeks. She opened one cabinet and winced. Spices she never touched. An immersion blender. 5 mugs. She only ever used 2. Another cabinet. 6 wine glasses, 4 chipped bowls, a lemon squeezer, a broken French press. She pulled everything out and laid it on the table. The pile made her feel vaguely ashamed, like the leftovers from a life she never quite lived. She made 4 sections. Keep. Donate. Sell. Trash. The air fryer finally made its exit. So did the cake stand. The bamboo salad tongs. The ceramic pitcher she never filled. She narrowed her kitchen down to essentials. 2 plates, 2 bowls, 2 forks, 1 knife, 1 small pan, 1 large pot, a cutting board, a kettle. It felt severe. It also felt right. When she stood back, she realized something strange. The kitchen looked bigger, like it had exhaled. The closet was next. She lit a candle before she began. Not for atmosphere, for courage. The clothes stared back like an audience of doubters. Dresses with tags, heels from events she never attended, trendy items that never suited her body, coats she kept just in case. She had read that most people wear only 20% of their wardrobe. Rachel wasn't most people. She figured her number was closer to 10%. She started pulling pieces, held up each one and asked, "Do I feel like myself in this? Not stylish, not trendy, not thinner. Myself." The pile grew fast. Goodwill would get several bags. A few nicer pieces she listed online. The rest, she folded gently and put away. When she finished, she had one small row of hangers. It looked almost like a store display, not curated, but lived in. Clothes that match her real life. And for the first time in years, she saw herself. Not a projected version, not a Pinterest board, but Rachel. By noon, she had filled 5 garbage bags, 3 donation boxes, and 1 envelope with notes to herself. Warnings. Reminders. You don't need to buy your identity. Silence is not emptiness. Stuff is not memory. You are the memory. If it costs peace, it's too expensive. She sat down at the dining table, now clear of all clutter. She brewed another cup of tea. No sugar, no distraction. And she realized this wasn't just downsizing. It was recovery. Recovery from the need to fill silence. From spending as self-soothing. From the false urgency of trends. From the myth that more is safety. She had lived under all of that for years. And now, it was falling away. Later that evening, Rachel took out her notebook and opened to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, "The aftermath, what I learned from the audit. I own more than I use. I buy more when I'm anxious. Most of my purchases were emotional, not practical. Letting go of things I don't use actually makes me feel richer. I was curating a fantasy life I didn't actually want. Peace feels like empty shelves and paid bills." She looked at the list and added one final line. 7. I'm not a failed version of anything. I'm just becoming. That night, she slept deeply. No nightmares, no racing thoughts, just stillness. The next morning, Rachel woke up before her alarm. She walked barefoot across the apartment and felt the cool, bare floor beneath her toes. She boiled water, poured it into her chipped mug, her favorite one, and looked around the room. There was space now, not just on the shelves or in the closet. Inside her, space to breathe, to plan, to start again. She opened the window and let the air in. And for the first time since the layoff, she said it out loud. This life is mine now, and it's enough. Rachel sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a blank poster board balanced on her lap. A pack of colored markers rested beside her, along with a ruler, a glue stick, and a stack of cut-up grocery ads she had collected over the week. It had been exactly 32 days since the layoff, and for the first time, she wasn't surviving in reaction to the loss. She was planning, proactively, intentionally. She called it her budget board, not a vision board, not a dream map. She wasn't interested in manifesting anymore. This was something more tactile, more accountable. This was her financial reality in full color. She had spent the last week combing through frugal living blogs, YouTube channels, and minimalist forums. Everyone had a system. Some people used envelopes. Others used spreadsheets. A few swore by apps. Rachel needed something she could see, something that lived on her wall, not her phone, where she might ignore it. She wanted physical, loud, honest. So if her habit started to slip, she'd have to face it every time she passed her dining table. She drew 4 columns across the top of the poster and labeled them in bold. Income, fixed, flexible goals. Then, she started filling in the rows. Income, unemployment benefits, $355 per week equals $1, 420/month. Occasional side gigs, goal $100, 200/month. She wrote this in green marker, the hope column. Fixed, rent, $1,285. Car payment, $387.44. Car insurance, $92. Phone, $55. Internet, $65. This column was red. Non-negotiables. She calculated the total. $1,584.44. Already, her expenses were more than her guaranteed income. But she had trimmed everywhere else. That's where the next column came in. Flexible. Groceries, $120. Gas, $60. Household, cleaning/laundry, $25. Miscellaneous, postage, gifts, emergencies, $40. Total, $245 per month. Still tight. Very tight. But with discipline, doable. And finally, the last column, the one that felt the most powerful. Goals. Emergency fund, $1,000. Pay off credit card, currently $7,300. Sell 10 and used items this month. Learn to repair instead of replace. Apply to at least 3 remote jobs per week. Stick to no-buy plan until end of spring. She wrote these in bright blue, a color that looked like possibility. She stepped back and looked at it. A year ago, her goals had included things like plan a trip to Italy, get promoted, buy a better couch. Now, her goals weren't aesthetic or aspirational. They were grounded, focused, raw. This wasn't Pinterest. This was survival. With style. She pinned a board to the wall using 2 push pins, stepped back, and took it in. A map, a mirror, a scoreboard, a promise. That afternoon, Rachel sat down to track every dollar she had spent since the freeze ended. It felt like an interrogation. She opened her notebook and started from the first of the month. Aldi, $26.44. Local transit card, $10. Phone payment, $55. Laundry coins, $6. Grocery store, $13.12. She paused at the next one. Coffee shop, $4.89. It was a slip. She remembered the day. Cold, wet. She'd been out job hunting and her hands had gone numb. She went in for the warmth, for the routine. She hadn't brought her thermos. She circled it in orange. Not to shame herself. To learn. Trigger. Cold. Comfort-seeking. Not planning ahead. She scribbled a note. Pack thermos when out longer than 2 hours. Carry tea bags. Always. She finished logging the rest. And only that one orange circle stood out. That was the moment she realized something radical. She hadn't failed. She had tracked. Reflected. Adjusted. That was growth. Later, while folding laundry, Rachel called her mother. Her mother answered on the 3rd ring, voice warm and wary. They hadn't talked much since the layoff. Not because of conflict, but because Rachel had avoided it. She didn't want the pity, the advice, the quiet panic in her mom's voice. But today she felt strong enough. Hey, Mom. Rach, how are you doing, Mija? Rachel took a deep breath. Actually, I'm doing okay. I've cut my expenses. I started tracking everything. I even made a budget board. There was a pause. Then, you made a what? Rachel laughed. It's like a wall calendar for my bills. Her mom chuckled softly. Sounds like something your abuela would have done. She used to keep her receipts in a shoebox. Balanced everything by hand. Rachel smiled. I wish I'd asked her to teach me. She would have been proud. She always said, people who know where their pennies go never stay broke for long. They talked for an hour. About money. About fear. About how her mom had once fed a family of 4 on $50 a week during the 1989 recession. Rachel scribbled down the phrase from her abuela. People who know where their pennies go never stay broke for long. She put on a sticky note and added it to the budget board. That night, something shifted in Rachel. She didn't feel desperate anymore. Not aimless. Not scrambling to patch holes in a sinking ship. For the first time, she felt like the captain of it. Still in choppy waters, sure, but steering. She opened a new page in her journal and asked herself a question. What does freedom look like to me now? She wrote for an hour. It's not about being rich. It's about not waking up afraid of the mail. It's about knowing I can feed myself for $25 a week and still feel full. It's opening a cabinet and seeing only what I use. It's peace on a Tuesday morning, not panic. It's buying something because I need it, not because I'm sad. It's knowing my worth isn't tied to what I can afford. When she was done, she copied one sentence in big block letters and taped it right under the budget board. Freedom is not having to escape. She stood in the middle of the apartment, arms crossed, studying her wall. It wasn't pretty, but it was hers. The faucet had been dripping for 2 weeks. Rachel could hear it at night, that soft, relentless plink of water into the steel basin. It wasn't just annoying. It was symbolic. A leak she hadn't faced. A slow bleed that echoed her pre-layoff spending habits. Before, she would have ignored it until it got worse. Maybe called the landlord. Or even worse, try to convince herself that buying a fancy new fixture would solve it. But she wasn't that version of herself anymore. Now, she wanted to understand the drip. Face it. Maybe even fix it. She searched how to fix a leaky kitchen faucet on YouTube. The first video was 23 minutes long, hosted by a man in overalls with the kind of confidence only people with full toolkits usually had. Rachel didn't own a wrench. She owned a multi-tool she'd bought during a brief flirtation with hiking that never panned out. But it had a few useful pieces. She pulled out a dish towel, tied her hair back, and stared at the sink like it had personally insulted her. It was a slow Monday morning. No job interviews, no pressing deadlines. Just her and the drip. She watched the video 3 times before she touched anything. Step 1. Turn off the water. She opened the cabinet below and found the valve. It was stiff. Her fingers shook a little as she turned it, unsure if she was doing it right. But eventually the handle gave, and the sound of the drip stopped. Silence. She smiled. Step 2. Remove the faucet handle. She used her multi-tool like a Swiss Army miracle and carefully unscrewed the pieces. The handle came off easier than expected, and she found the little rubber washer, cracked and dried. This, she whispered to no one, is the thing. It was tiny, fragile, but it was the problem. Step 3. Replace the washer. She didn't have one yet, so she walked 2 miles to the nearest hardware store. She could have taken the bus, but Rachel had learned something about walking since the layoff. It gave her time, space to think, and it made every errand feel deliberate, grounded. At the store, the clerk, a woman in her 60s with short gray curls and thick gloves, listened patiently as Rachel held up the worn washer and explained what she was trying to do. You need a number 8 O-ring. Cheap. Comes in a pack. She handed her a small plastic bag with 6 identical washers. Price tag, $1.89. Rachel smiled. Cheaper than calling a plumber. The woman grinned. That's what my grandma used to say. Rachel walked back in the late morning sun, bag swinging from her wrist, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Capability. It was a tiny thing, fixing a sink, but it was a form of self-respect, a declaration that she wasn't helpless, that her intelligence and effort still mattered, that even without a salary, she could generate value. She got home, slid the new washer into place, and reassembled the faucet like a cautious surgeon. She turned the valve back on. No drip, not even a whisper. She stared at the sink like she'd just won a prize fight. She wiped her hands and made a note in her notebook. Fix the sink. Spent $1.89. Learned something I'll use forever. And underneath it, empowerment doesn't always look like big wins. Sometimes it's just fixing what you were taught to ignore. That small act opened a floodgate. Suddenly, she started seeing broken things everywhere. The loose knob on the drawer, the sticky hinge on the bathroom cabinet, the shelf that tilted to the left. She started a list. Things to fix instead of replace. Drawer knob, wobbly chair leg, busted lamp, probably just a wire issue. Missing button on gray cardigan. Loose tile in entryway. Instead of adding them to her imaginary shopping cart, she added them to her fix-it plan. Each one, she approached like a puzzle. YouTube, forums, a few calls to her uncle Marco, who had worked construction for decades and loved any excuse to explain things. Her uncle's voice was warm and gravelly. You're not useless, Mija. You just never had to learn this before. They make you think money fixes things, but knowledge is cheaper. That one sentence echoed in her mind for days. They make you think money fixes things, but knowledge is cheaper. She taped that to her budget board too. The lamp took 3 tries. She nicked her thumb with a screwdriver. Got shocked. Swore. Almost gave up. But on the 3rd try it worked. The bulb lit up with a satisfying pop. She sat there in the glow, a Band-Aid on her finger, and laughed. This was new territory. Rachel is fixer, builder, mechanic of her own small world. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about no longer outsourcing her power. Every problem she solved with her own hands became a little brick in a new foundation of her life. The next Saturday, she visited her mom. She brought a jar of homemade lentil soup and the extra washers. Her mother raised an eyebrow when Rachel opened the kitchen cabinet and crouched beneath the sink. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Fixing your drip," Rachel said. Her mom chuckled. "It's been like that for a year." Rachel smirked. "Exactly." 15 minutes later, the sink was silent. Her mother stood over her, hands on hips, pretending not to be impressed. "You're turning into your abuelo," she said. "He used to fix everything, even things no one asked him to fix." Rachel laughed. "I guess it's genetic." They ate soup together at the table, talking about old family stories. And for the first time since her layoff, Rachel didn't feel like a disappointment. She felt like a woman becoming someone new, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. That evening, she added a new column to her budget board. Skills I'm learning instead of buying. Basic plumbing, clothing repair, light electrical fixes, homemade cleaning products, meal planning, financial tracking, DIY home maintenance. Each line was proof that poverty didn't mean helplessness. She was poor in cash right now, but she was rich in progress. And more importantly, rich in her own eyes. She stared at the board and whispered a quiet truth she hadn't dared say before. "I trust myself now." It was nearly midnight when Rachel found the post. She had been scrolling through job boards for hours, her eyes dry, her back aching from sitting hunched over the second-hand dining chair she used as an office seat. She had filtered by remote, part-time, entry-level, and still, every title sounded like code for either overwork or underpay. Executive virtual assistant, $9 per hour. Online tutor, master's degree required. Freelance writer, must submit 5 unpaid samples. She was exhausted, not just from job hunting, but from a mental gymnastics of filtering through what was real and what was exploitation with good branding. Then she saw it. Get paid to declutter. Sell and used items on consignment. No upfront costs. She clicked. A woman named Natalie posted it in a minimalist Facebook group Rachel had recently joined. The picture showed a garage full of curated boxes and a handwritten note taped to one. $172 earned last month. Mostly clothes. Rachel narrowed her eyes. She scrolled the comments. Dozens of replies. Curious, skeptical, hopeful. Natalie responded to each with patience and detail. She explained the method. Collect and used household goods. Photograph them clearly. List them on niche resale groups. Not eBay. Not Mercury. Those were saturated. And offer to resell for neighbors or friends who didn't want to deal with the hassle. Take a small cut. Cash or Venmo. No flashy promises. No claims of thousands overnight. Just a simple sentence. If you're already decluttering, you're halfway there. Rachel sat up straighter. This wasn't drop shipping. It wasn't a pyramid scheme or affiliate nightmare. It was slow, tangible, manual. It sounded like her life. The next morning, Rachel emailed Natalie. By lunch, she had a PDF guide in her inbox. Natalie had written it herself. It was simple, with tips on how to photograph items in natural light, how to create Google Sheets for tracking sales, and which Facebook groups had the most ethical buyers. Rachel printed it out, hole-punched it, and placed it in a binder labeled Side Hustle, Trials. She was learning not to leap anymore. To test. To track. To treat new ideas like guests, not saviors. By the end of the week, she had listed 2 lamps, a stack of books in a literary bundle, a barely used humidifier, 4 mugs, aesthetic, neutral tones, a cozy set of 2 throw pillows and a fleece blanket. She borrowed her friend Danny's ring light for the photos. Set up a tiny display corner by her clean white wall. Every image had soft shadows, natural light, a calming tone. Minimalism sells. That much she understood now. She priced modestly. She offered porch pickup for local buyers. And for the first time in a while, her phone buzzed with offers. By the end of the second week, she had made $144.30. Cash. Clean. She didn't spend a dime of it. It all went into her emergency envelope. She added a sticky note to her budget board. Declutter dollars. But the side hustle did something else too. It shifted her identity. Rachel was no longer unemployed. She was working. Not full-time. Not traditional. But working. The momentum of purpose stirred something inside her. She started waking up earlier, making lists, categorizing items to sell, creating a spreadsheet to track costs, earnings, photos taken, messages sent. She wasn't just decluttering. She was learning micro-commerce, inventory, customer service, visual merchandising. This wasn't a business, but it was a rebuild, and each dollar proved it. Still, not everything was smooth. One Saturday, she sold a vintage clock to a buyer who ghosted her after pickup, never paid. Another time, she mispriced a blender and lost money on the shipping. She wrote those losses down too, made notes, created a tab in her spreadsheet labeled Lessons. Always take payment before porch pickup. Don't ship until funds are received. Weigh items for accurate shipping cost. Honesty matters, but so does confidence in price. She was running a tiny store now, one transaction at a time, and it made her feel something no full-time job had ever given her: ownership. Then came the request from her neighbor. Rachel barely knew her, a quiet woman named Layla who always wore headscarves and grew tomatoes on the balcony. "I saw your listing for the mug set," Layla said one afternoon in the hallway. "Do you help other people sell things?" Rachel hesitated. I could. What are you thinking?" Layla smiled, lifting a small box. "I've got a few things I was going to donate, but I'm between jobs too. If you could sell them, we could split it." Rachel blinked. The air felt different. This wasn't just a hustle now. This was mutual aid, a barter system for the broke and resourceful. "I'd love to," she said. They agreed on a 20% commission. Layla gave her a tote bag with jewelry, scarves, and a barely used slow cooker. Rachel listed everything within 2 days. By the end of the week, she handed Layla $48 in cash. "You're good at this," Layla said softly, almost surprised. Rachel didn't say anything right away. But that night, she added a new line to her wall. "I am learning to build what no one will give me." By the end of the month, Rachel's side hustle had earned her $322.87. She put $250 into her emergency fund, $30 toward groceries, and the rest into laundry, transit, and savings jars. She also bought one thing: a used label maker from Facebook Marketplace. $10. Because labeling her inventory felt like permission, like she was allowed to own this new version of herself. A seller, a builder, a minimalist with a margin. The produce aisle was brighter than usual. Too bright. It reflected off the waxy apples and back into Rachel's tired eyes. She squinted, adjusted her tote bag on her shoulder, and reached for the notebook in her coat pocket, the one she had started calling the grocery log. Inside were 2 pages of scribbled prices, meal plans, and handwritten reminders like, "Only buy what you can freeze or use within 5 days. Frozen veggies, fresh if not on sale. Ignore middle aisles. Go in, get out." The grocery notebook had become her financial compass. And today it was going to be tested. It was the first Sunday of the month, and Rachel had set a new food budget: $100. Not for the week, for the month. When she had mentioned it to Danny, her friend had stared at her like she'd just announced she was going to climb Everest with a paperclip. "That's like impossible, isn't it?" Danny said. Rachel had smiled softly. "Not if I cook like my abuela used to." Rachel had grown up watching her grandmother stretch every dollar until it begged for mercy. Rice and lentils weren't just staples, they were ceremony. She used to tell Rachel, "Comida no es lujo. Es amor." Food isn't luxury, it's love. And now, love was going to have to come in bulk bags and off-brand cans. She stood in front of the 10-pound rice sacks and did the math. $8.99. It would last the whole month, maybe longer. She circled it on her list and lifted it carefully into her cart. Next stop, dried beans. She picked black beans and red lentils, both under $2 a pound. Then oats, a giant tub for $3.59. Breakfast for weeks. Canned tomatoes, frozen spinach, store-brand peanut butter. She skipped the fancy cheese section like it owed her money. Skipped the juice aisle, the chips, the $6 kombucha that used to be her guilty pleasure. She paused only once, at the clearance bakery rack. There was a loaf of day-old sourdough for $1. She squeezed it gently, still soft. She added it to her cart like a quiet reward. Back home, she unpacked everything with a reverence she hadn't felt since childhood. Every item was a choice. Every dollar had a job. She lined the food up on the counter and took a photo. Not for Instagram. For herself. A record of what was possible. Then she pulled out her second notebook, the meal matrix. She opened to the chart she had drawn, a simple grid with meals down one side, ingredients across the top. She filled it in slowly. Lentil soup, lentils, carrots, onion, canned tomato. Stir-fried rice, frozen veggies, egg. Peanut noodles, pasta, peanut butter, soy sauce. Overnight oats, cinnamon, banana if on sale. Red beans and rice, beans, rice, garlic hot sauce. She had 12 meals planned. Enough variety to feel human. Enough repetition to feel in control. And maybe, just maybe enough to make her believe that restriction didn't have to mean misery. That week, she cooked every day. Her kitchen, once a museum of unused gadgets and broken routines, came alive. She soaked beans overnight, stirred soups slowly, measured spices with patience instead of impulse. She even began saving her veggie scraps in a freezer bag, planning to boil them later for stock. Herb Wella would have approved. One night, while eating lentil soup with a slice of toasted sourdough, Rachel wrote in her journal, "I used to buy $17 pasta from DoorDash because I thought I was too tired to cook. But I wasn't tired. I was disconnected. I thought convenience was kindness to myself. But sometimes it's a trap. Now, I stir with purpose. I eat with gratitude. And I clean the pot like it gave me something sacred." Food had become more than nourishment. It had become a ritual, a signal to her nervous system that she was in control again. She began lighting a candle at dinner, not because she was trying to romanticize poverty, but because she wanted to reclaim beauty. Even now, especially now, and somehow it worked, even when all she could afford was rice and onions. She also made a rule: no screens while eating. It was awkward at first. She had always paired food with YouTube, podcasts, music. The silence felt loud. But in that silence, something unexpected happened. She started tasting things. She started hearing the sounds of her own breath, of birds outside, of neighbors laughing faintly down the hall. She even started thinking, not spiraling, not panicking, just thinking about what she wanted, what she could create next. At the end of the month, she opened her grocery notebook and did the math. $98.43. Under budget. She sat back and smiled. She had fed herself for 30 days. No takeout, no shortcuts, no hunger. And for the first time in her adult life, food didn't feel like a frantic decision made at 6 p.m. It felt like agency. She stapled her grocery receipt into the notebook and titled the page, Month 1, the $100 challenge, completed. Then she added a line underneath in red ink. I didn't starve. I simplified. The next day, she shared her story in the Minimalist Facebook group. She posted a picture of her grocery haul, her meal plan grid, and a few of her favorite meals. She didn't expect much, just wanted to document the win. Within an hour, she had 127 likes. Comments poured in. This is beautiful. Can you post a peanut noodle recipe? Thank you for reminding me what's possible. You've inspired me to try this next month. This isn't a budget. This is self-respect. Rachel blinked back tears. She hadn't expected community to come through a rice bag and a soup pot. But it did. And it reminded her she wasn't alone. Frugality wasn't failure. Minimalism wasn't deprivation. Simplicity, when chosen with love, could be its own form of abundance. Rachel had always loved the library in theory. As a kid, it was a place to escape the summer heat and get lost in books she couldn't afford to buy. As a teen, it was a quiet refuge from a loud house. But as an adult, she had forgotten about it. Forgotten that silence was free. That Wi-Fi didn't need a login. That you could sit for hours and not be asked to buy a coffee or move along. Now, the library had become her lifeline. And more than that, it had become her office. She arrived at 9:55 a.m. every weekday, just before the doors unlocked. In her tote bag, her budget binder, her Chromebook, her side hustle notebook, and a stainless steel thermos filled with black tea. She claimed the same table in the far corner, one with a view of the park and just enough light to feel hopeful. To outsiders, she might have looked like a student or a freelance writer. But Rachel was something more sacred, a woman rebuilding her life from scratch. She started each day the same way. First, she opened her journal and wrote, "What matters most today?" Sometimes the answer was list 3 new items for sale. Other times it was apply to remote admin jobs. Sometimes it was just stay calm, stay focused, breathe. Then she would open her laptop, check her spreadsheet, and begin. Job boards, resale forums, local gigs. She searched for part-time roles with flexible hours. She updated her resume, now with a whole section titled, Independent Resale Coordinator, Freelance. She laughed when she first typed it, but it wasn't a joke. She was coordinating resale for 3 neighbors now. She had tracked over $500 of transactions. She had systems, a binder, a client list. Maybe it wasn't corporate, but it was real. By noon, she usually took a break. Not to leave, just to stretch. To close the laptop and look out the window. To people watch the joggers and dog walkers. She started noticing the regulars. The retired man who read the newspaper every day with a pen tucked behind his ear. The mother with 2 toddlers who came for story time. The teenager who watched chess tutorials on YouTube like they were gospel. Rachel never interrupted them, but she appreciated their constancy. She wasn't alone in this slow reinvention. Afternoons were for learning. Each day, she picked one topic to research. Best free accounting tools for solopreneurs. How to write product descriptions that sell. High-yield savings accounts with no fees. Budgeting apps versus bullet journals. Which one sticks? Freelancer taxes. What no one tells you. She wasn't just budgeting now. She was educating herself. One day at a time, she turned ignorance into confidence. And the library was her university. Tuition? $0. Eventually, the librarians noticed her. Not in a bad way. In a we see you, we respect you way. One afternoon, the older woman at the front desk, turquoise jewelry and all, approached her with a paper flyer. Career Center meets here on Wednesdays, she said. No pressure, but they help with resume coaching and mock interviews. Thought you might want to know. Rachel blinked. Thank you. The woman smiled. We've seen you. You're here every day. That's not nothing. Rachel folded the flyer carefully and tucked it into her planner. She would go, not because she was desperate, but because she was ready to own this new version of herself, the one who asked for help without shame. That Wednesday, she showed up early, pressed her shirt, wore clean jeans, brushed her hair into something close to professional. The room was small, 6 folding chairs, a whiteboard with smudged handwriting, a facilitator named Mike who used to work in HR for a tech firm. They went around in a circle. A laid-off hotel concierge, a former teacher switching careers, a single dad trying to go remote. When it was Rachel's turn, she cleared her throat and said, I'm Rachel. I used to work in customer experience at a retail tech company. I was laid off 2 months ago. I've been doing freelance resale since then. And now, I'm looking for something flexible and stable. But I'm also figuring out who I am outside of a paycheck. There was a pause. Then Mike nodded. That's the real work. Most people skip that part. Rachel smiled. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel behind. She felt brave. Later that day, back at her usual table, she reflected. She wasn't where she wanted to be. Not yet. But she was building, not just recovering. She pulled out a sticky note and wrote a sentence she'd heard in the workshop. You were allowed to rebuild slow. She added it to the edge of her laptop screen. Because that's what this was. Not a race, not a comeback tour, but a slow, steady restoration. And a library. It was her construction site. That Friday, it rained. Hard. The kind of sideways rain that soaks your socks within seconds. But Rachel still showed up. Umbrella snapped inside out. Hair a mess. The librarian smiled as she entered. Now that's commitment. Rachel grinned. My office doesn't close for weather. She set up her laptop, peeled off her wet coat, and got to work. That day, she got an email from one of the remote jobs she'd applied for weeks ago. A small nonprofit needed someone to manage their email inbox and track donor responses. 10 hours a week. $18 an hour. She stared at the screen. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough. Enough to breathe, to cover her phone bill and groceries, to prove that her momentum was real. She replied with a yes. Polite. Professional. Then she closed the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let herself smile. Small win, but a real win. As she left that evening, rain boots squeaking, she paused at the front desk. Thank you, she said to the librarian. The woman tilted her head. For what? For not asking why I was here every day. The librarian winked. We never ask. Libraries are for people becoming. Rachel stood in the middle of her living room, barefoot, holding a small cardboard box labeled Keep. It was a last box. The others, the ones labeled Donate, Sell, and Recycle, were already gone. It had taken her almost 2 months, But this was the final step in her minimalist transition. Not the glamorous version on Pinterest with white rugs and $400 lamps. This was the real version, peeling sticker residue off the backs of old picture frames, folding clothes with holes into donation bins, letting go of books she once thought would fix her life. In the end, it came down to this one box. Her essentials, her truth, what she carried, and what she had let go. She knelt slowly and opened the flaps. Inside, a weathered copy of the house on Mango Street. A Polaroid of her and her little brother from 1996, both grinning with missing teeth. Her grandmother's wooden spoon, a hand-knit scarf she wore during her first winter alone in the city. Her budgeting binder, a journal she'd nearly burned once, but now couldn't imagine parting with. 6 things. That's what remained after Rachel had gone through every drawer, every shelf, every storage bin under the bed. Her apartment looked like it belonged to someone else now, but also, finally, to her. Clear surfaces, sparse walls, no junk drawer. Each object was deliberate, each space intentional. It didn't feel empty. It felt honest. She sat down on the floor, crossed her legs, and ran her fingers across the cover of the journal. The one she used to hide under piles of unopened mail. The one filled with panic entries from the first week of her layoff. Messy, frantic words written at 3 a.m. when she didn't know how she was going to make rent. Now those pages were quiet, reflective, clear. She flipped to the most recent entry. There are only 2 types of fear I've known. The fear of losing everything and the fear of starting again. I've lived through both now. And somehow, I'm still here. Still making rice and beans from scratch. Still showing up at the library. Still turning pennies into purpose. And most shockingly, still not giving up. She closed the journal and held it in her lap, eyes misty. She didn't cry like she used to, big, gut-wrenching sobs that felt like surrender. Now, the tears were quieter, like a bow of gratitude to a chapter finally ending. She stood up and walked slowly from room to room, not to inspect, to bless. In the bathroom, only the essentials, toothbrush, Castile soap, rose oil, a single towel. The mirror was free of messages taped in desperation. Just her reflection now. In the kitchen, 1 pot on the stove, 1 wooden spoon drying in the rack, a list of meals on the fridge, and a sticky note. You don't need more. You need less with purpose. In the bedroom, a mattress on the floor, clean sheets, 2 outfits hanging in the closet, a laundry basket, and a shoe rack with only 3 pairs. Everything that was left had earned its place. Everything gone had served its purpose and moved on. Rachel whispered as she passed through each room. Thank you. I release you. Not to the things, to the versions of herself that had clung to them. The final space she entered was the corner near the window, the one that now served as her office. Her laptop sat closed, the library tote packed for tomorrow. Above the desk was her budget board, now laminated, wiped clean each month, and rewritten by hand. She liked it that way, the rhythm of it, the ritual. Next to it, a new edition, a corkboard covered in clipped quotes, handwritten affirmations, job interview prep, and small victories. Saved $112 on groceries in April. First week of new remote job equals done. Layla said I inspire her. Emergency fund, $408 and growing. Small wins. But together, they told a larger story. Recovery isn't linear, but it is real. Rachel sat at the desk and opened her laptop. She didn't scroll, didn't check social media. She opened her document folder and clicked on one labeled The New Life Plan. It wasn't as dramatic as it sounded. It was a single page, a living document, not goals but anchors, statements that kept her grounded. I will keep my expenses low even when income rises. I will never again ignore my bank account. I will keep building skills, not just resumes. I will protect my peace before chasing profit. I will measure wealth by stability, not status. She added a new one. 6. I will never be ashamed of starting over. The following morning, she went to the library as usual, sat at her usual table, sipped tea from her thermos. But today felt different, because today marked 60 days since the layoff. 60 days of saying no. 60 days of walking instead of driving. 60 days of home-cooked meals, fixed furniture, and no Amazon boxes. 60 days of self-doubt, grit, spreadsheets, and soup. 60 days of building a life she could afford and love. She opened her budgeting binder and smiled at the final number on the monthly tracker. Total expenses, $865.17. A 70% reduction from her first month after the layoff. She had done it, and not through deprivation, but through design. Back at home that night, Rachel finally unpacked the keep box and placed each item on her now nearly empty bookshelf. Not to fill space, to honor it. The Polaroid went in a frame. The budgeting binder went on the center shelf. The spoon hung on a tiny hook in the kitchen. She folded the scarf, placed it in the drawer, and lit a small candle next to her journal. Then she sat quietly on the floor, legs crossed, eyes closed. And she said the words that had waited so long to be spoken. I didn't just survive. I redesigned the whole damn thing. There were no standing ovations, no viral post, no mentor calling to say, "You did it." No camera crew knocking on her door to ask, "How does it feel?" There was just Tuesday, and toast, and unpaid utility bills. And Rachel, still waking early, still boiling lentils, still checking job boards between loads of laundry. The world didn't notice her quiet revolution, but she did, and that had to be enough. The month after Rachel cut her expenses by 70%, something unexpected happened. She felt tired, not the kind of tired that begged for sleep. The kind that settled in the bones, emotional fatigue. She had done so much. Decluttered, budgeted, worked, cooked, saved. She had proven to herself, over and over, that she could live on less, spend intentionally, and build a new foundation. But it was all internal, invisible, and sometimes it felt like screaming into a void. That week, she received 3 rejection emails. Not form letters. Actual emails from hiring managers. "You're an impressive candidate, but we went with someone with more experience. You're overqualified for this role, and we're concerned you won't stay long. We love your story, but we need someone full-time in office." She stared at the last one. They loved her story, but not enough to hire her. She shut the laptop, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and just stood there, silent. In her journal that night, she wrote, "Is this how it's supposed to feel? You get up, you try again, you budget, you breathe, you wait, but no one claps. No one hands you a trophy for not giving up. No one sees the nights you didn't panic buy something just to feel in control. No one celebrates a $3 grocery win or the fact that you finally have $400 in savings for the first time in years. But I see it. I see it. And maybe that's the point." She underlined the last sentence twice. The next morning, Rachel did something bold. She printed out her budget board, the one she'd refined over months, and made 5 copies. Then she added her grocery list template, a 1-page minimalist decluttering guide, and a personal note. She posted them on a community board at the laundromat, at the library, at the bus stop. Each packet was stapled and labeled. "Build a life you can afford, one step at a time." She didn't include her name. She didn't need praise. She just wanted someone else to know. You can start from nothing. You can cut your expenses. You can rebuild, slowly, quietly, privately. Because someone out there was exactly where she had been. Terrified, broke, ashamed, and maybe, just maybe, her steps could light their path. That Saturday, Rachel cleaned her apartment top to bottom. Not because anyone was coming over. Not because of some productivity ritual. Because it reminded her that she was in control. That her space was hers. That order was possible, even when nothing else made sense. She wiped the baseboards, vacuumed under the bed, washed the one window in her bedroom until the light poured in like truth. Then she sat on the floor with her feet tucked beneath her and looked around. She had food. She had warmth. She had time. Not money. Not status. Not likes or follows. But the basics and the bravery to protect them. Later that night, she video called her cousin Mariella, the one who used to call her bougie broke back when Rachel ordered sushi on a credit card. Mariella's face lit up on the screen. "Girl, you're glowing. Look at you. You got that free look in your eye." Rachel laughed. "I guess I do." They talked for hours. About food. About family. About how Rachel had become obsessed with vinegar-based cleaning hacks and homemade bean soup. Mariella leaned into the screen and said something Rachel wasn't expecting. "You're the richest poor person I know." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment." "It is," Mariella said. "You're broke, but you've got peace. And a plan. Most people don't have either." Rachel sat with that. Peace and a plan. That's what she'd traded her old spending habits for. That's what she'd earned with every no, every spreadsheet, every lentil pot. And maybe, for now, that was enough. A few days later, Rachel walked past the library's community board on her way out and noticed something surprising. Someone had taken her packet, then another, and someone had written on the bottom of the last one, "Thank you. I needed this." That small scrawl, in blue pen, barely legible, made her stop in her tracks. Someone had needed it. Someone had seen her invisible work and said yes. She blinked, smiled, and walked out into the cold, feeling more seen than any award could make her feel. In her journal that night, she wrote, "Some days, you don't need applause. You just need one person to whisper, 'Me too.' That's enough fuel for another week." And it was. That weekend, Rachel didn't hustle, didn't budget, didn't organize. She rested. She read a novel, made sweet potato stew, took a bath. She let herself enjoy the stillness she'd fought so hard to create. And as she dried off with the one towel she now owned, she whispered, "You don't have to earn rest. You just have to allow it." She was learning that too. The apartment was almost silent, except for the steady scratching of pen on paper. Rachel sat at her dining table, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, a cup of reheated tea beside her, and the old desk lamp casting a soft circle of light across the wood. Around her, there were no piles, no bags, no unopened boxes, no clutter. She wasn't trying to fix anything today. She was trying to name it. All of it. The transformation, the mess, the learning, the letting go, everything that had happened since she was laid off. She opened a fresh page in her journal and titled it, "My Life on One Page, the Version I Built." And she began to write. Not a poem, not a manifesto, just facts, clear and grounded. Housing, $1,285 per month. Share now. A roommate named Nina moved in last week. Quiet, clean, responsible. Half the rent equals freedom. Car, still hers, still reliable. Paid 3 months ahead now. Phone plus internet, combined under $120. Paid on time. No more late fees. Groceries, $90 per month, with homemade meal prep Sundays. Hasn't eaten takeout in 78 days. Subscriptions, canceled. All of them. Uses the library for books, free YouTube for workouts. Doesn't miss any of it. Debt, credit card balance down to $5,300. Snowball method in full swing. Minimums always paid. Extra when side hustle money comes in. Income, remote nonprofit admin job. 12 hours per week at $18 per hour. Freelance resale hustle. Now partnered with 3 neighbors. Brings in $250 to $400 per month. Occasional surveys and microtasks for extra. Savings, $612. Emergency fund only. Never touched. It's her oxygen tank. Budgeting, still analog. Still in the binder. Updated every Sunday. It's her ritual. Mental health, stable. Stronger. More honest. Journaled 45 days straight. Sleeps better now. Anxiety still comes, but it no longer controls her. Joy, found in cooking. Found in silence. Found in walking alone through the park with thermos tea and podcasts about resilience. Shame, shrinking. Pride, growing. She looked down at the list. Nothing fancy. No fireworks. Just truth. Her life, no longer scattered across bills, bank statements, and broken habits, now lived on one page. And that was the victory. She remembered a time when her identity had been stitched to her paycheck. A time when she believed financial chaos was her fault. When shame made her spend more. Because the illusion of control was cheaper than confronting reality. But she had faced the numbers. Faced herself. And found dignity there. Outside, the evening light was turning gold. Rachel stood, stretched, and opened the window. The breeze carried in the scent of rain on concrete. Leaves in motion. Something quietly alive. She breathed deeply and whispered, "It's enough. This life, it's finally enough. Not perfect, not polished, but enough." Later that night, she hosted something she called a soup swap. 3 women from her building came, Layla, the neighbor who grew balcony tomatoes, and 2 others who had seen Rachel's flyer at the laundromat. Each brought a pot of homemade soup. They sat cross-legged on thrifted rugs, passed around bowls, and talked about stretch marks, side hustles, and how to feed a family for under $30 a week. There were no influencers, no aesthetic spreads, just women with coupons and resilience and giant bags under their eyes from doing too much with too little. Rachel looked around the circle and realized this was wealth too, not money, but mutuality, the kind where no one pretended they were fine and no one judged when they weren't. Later, after the last spoon had been scraped clean and the last pot rinsed, Rachel scribbled in her journal, "Frugality brought me peace, but community is what saved me." The next morning, she received a text. It was from Mina, her new roommate. "Your system is impressive. I've been tracking my food budget because of you. Also, I downloaded that spreadsheet template. Thank you." Rachel smiled, thumbs poised above the screen. "You're welcome. Let me know if you want a meal plan together next week." No reply yet, but the seed was planted, and that was enough. Later that day, she added a new page to her budgeting binder. At the top, she wrote, "Stability plan, 6-month projection." She calculated, side hustle scaling to $500 per month, adding one more resale client, applying to 3 additional nonprofits for part-time remote work, keeping monthly expenses below $950, building emergency fund to $1,500, paying off remaining credit card balance by month 6. She looked in the numbers. They weren't pretty, but they weren't impossible. They were hers. And for the first time in her adult life, she believed in them. That afternoon, while cleaning, Rachel found a receipt tucked inside an old wallet. It was from 5 months ago. $68.43, sushi dinner, and 2 cocktails. A Tuesday night. A treat after a rough work week. She had put on a credit card. Now it made her pause. Not out of guilt, but out of grief. Grief for the version of herself who thought money could fix exhaustion. Grief for the self who worked 50 hours a week and still felt broke. Grief for the woman who whispered, "I deserve this," as she sank deeper into debt. Not because she believed it, but because she needed to. Rachel folded the receipt and burned it in a small ceramic bowl by the sink. She watched the paper curl into ash. No anger, no judgment, just closure. That night, as she lay in bed, she looked around her room, noticed the absence of anxiety, the simplicity of it all, the soft rhythm of her own breathing. No buzzing fridge from overuse, no cluttered bedside table, no guilt pressing on her chest, just stillness. And in the stillness, a thought. I own this life, every inch of it. And then she slept, deeply, wholly, completely. It was just past 3 p.m. when Rachel heard the knock. 3 short raps, hesitant but firm. She wasn't expecting anyone. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. She had just finished prepping a week's worth of vegetable soup and walked cautiously toward the door. Peeking through the peephole, she saw a familiar figure in a denim jacket and aviator sunglasses. She opened it slowly. Marco. Her uncle leaned on the doorframe, grinning. "Surprise, Mija." Rachel blinked. What are you doing here?" He held up a plastic bag. "Brought tamales. You said you missed Abuela's recipe. Figure it was time for a delivery." She stepped aside, warmth rising in her chest. "Come in." Marco hadn't visited in almost a year. Not since the Christmas before last. He'd always been the family's quiet one. The fixer, the handyman, the guy who never said much but always showed up when something broke. Rachel had always admired him from distance. He lived 2 cities away and spent most of his time working on home renovation projects or volunteering at the local community garden. They sat at the table, 2 steaming tamales between them, soft music playing faintly from her old speaker. He glanced around the apartment. "It's different in here." Rachel nodded. "I got rid of most of it." He raised an eyebrow. Voluntarily. She smiled. "Every last item. I counted my forks. I have 2 now." Marco chuckled. Rachel watched his eyes scan the clean countertops, the decluttered bookshelf, the single candle burning near the window. "It's peaceful," he said. She nodded. "That's the goal." They ate in silence for a while. Comfortable silence. Then, softly, Marco said, "Your mom told me about the layoff." Rachel nodded, chewing slowly. "She said you were handling it. Figure that meant you were falling apart quietly." Rachel laughed. Not bitterly, but warmly. "That's what I thought too. But then I realized I wasn't falling apart. I was falling inward." Marco tilted his head. "Inward." "I stopped trying to earn peace with stuff. Started trying to make space for it instead. He smiled. You always were the poetic one. She blushed. Not really. Just broke and tired. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. But you did something most people don't. You faced it. And then you changed it. Rachel swallowed the lump rising in her throat. I had to. There wasn't anything left to distract me. I couldn't spin to feel okay anymore. So I started looking at what I had. And I made that enough. Marco nodded slowly, the admiration clear in his eyes. After dinner, Rachel offered him tea. He accepted, and while the water boiled, he stepped over to her budget board. Is this yours? Rachel grinned. My pride and joy. He read through it, the laminated columns, the color-coded categories, the debt snowball progress chart at the bottom. Did you make this from scratch? She nodded. I update it every Sunday. He nodded approvingly. Remind me of Abuela. She used to track her grocery prices on the back of old envelopes. Rachel laughed. I do that too. I have a grocery notebook. Marco smiled, then turned to face her. I brought you something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small white envelope, handwritten on the front. In case of fire or a dream. Rachel raised her eyebrows. What's this? Something I started doing a few years ago. Every time I finished a big contract, I'd take $100 in cash and set it aside. No label. No plan. Just in case. He slid the envelope across the table. This is $500. For you. Rachel froze. Marco. Wait, he said, holding up a hand. It's not a bailout. You're not drowning. I see that. This isn't rescue money. She opened the flap. 5 crisp $100 bills inside. This is seed money. For whatever comes next. Not for rent. Not for groceries. For the version of you that's still waiting in the wings. She blinked fast, trying to hold back the tears. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just use it when you're ready. That night, after he left, Rachel sat at the table with the envelope in her lap. She didn't spend it. She didn't even touch the bills. She just looked at them, this small stack of paper that represented belief. Not charity, not pity, but trust. Someone saw her, saw what she was trying to build, and wanted to invest in it. She added a sticky note to the envelope and placed it in her binder. For the dream. When it's time. And then, as if moved by something electric, she opened a new document on her laptop. She titled it, Workshops, Budgeting for Beginners. She didn't know the format yet. Didn't know if it would be local or virtual, free or paid. But she knew this. She had taken herself from panic to peace. And if someone else was where she used to be, lost in receipts, drowning in shame, thinking $12 in their checking account meant they were failing, she wanted to reach them and say, You're not failing. You're just not finished. She outlined a 3-part workshop. Week 1, Facing the Numbers, Guilt-Free Budgeting. Week 2, Cutting Without Deprivation, Frugal Joy. Week 3, Building from Zero, Emergency Funds, Side Hustles and Hope. Each section had exercises, journaling prompts, and real data from her own journey. She stared at the screen. The words felt real, solid, possible. And in that moment, for the first time in months, she believed she had something to offer. Not just a story, but a system. One that had carried her out of survival into sovereignty. She emailed Danny the outline. The subject line read, Idea brewing. Tell me if I'm crazy. Danny replied 10 minutes later. Not crazy. Necessary. Let's do it. I'll help with logistics. You write the magic. Rachel smiled and stared at the ceiling for a long time, the laptop warm on her legs, the room humming with new energy. A plan. A spark. A beginning again. The folding chair wobbled. Rachel pressed her hand down on the right side, trying to even it out. It was the last one left in the library meeting room, squeaky, unbalanced, and dusted with what looked like glitter from a long-forgotten kid's craft hour. She smiled. Of course it would be the broken one. And yet, it didn't bother her. Because she was finally here. Her name wasn't on a billboard. There was no sponsor. No projector. Just 6 folding chairs, a coffee urn borrowed from the front desk, and a stack of printed worksheets bound with paper clips. But this was her moment. Rachel Ortiz, once drowning in debt and shame, was about to teach her first financial workshop. Budgeting for Beginners, From Panic to Peace. She paced in front of the whiteboard, nerves buzzing just beneath her skin. She had practiced this intro 5 times in her head. Still, she could feel the heat rising in her chest, the weight of what this meant. This wasn't just information. It was her story, her survival, a path she had carved out with nothing but paper, grit, and refusal. At exactly 6:02 p.m., the door opened. First came Lisa, a tired-looking mom in a scrubs top, hair tied back in a loose knot. Then Kenny, a recent college grad who had replied to her flyer with 3 words, "Is this free?" Then Layla, her neighbor, carrying a plastic bag of homemade cookies just in case. Then 2 women she didn't know, one clutching a bus pass, the other holding her phone like a life preserver. Rachel greeted each one, offered tea from her thermos, and motioned them to take a seat. 6 total, including herself. Small. Perfect. She took a breath, tapped the dry erase marker on the board twice, and began. "Hi, I'm Rachel," she said, voice steady despite her pulse pounding. "I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a coach. I'm not sponsored by any bank. I'm just someone who used to think budgeting was punishment." A few smiles. A few nods. I thought it meant restriction. A way to tell myself no over and over until I hated my life. But then I lost my job, and I had no choice but to look at my numbers. She paused, let it land, and what I found wasn't shame. It was a map, one that led me somewhere I didn't even know I could go. She motioned to the stack of handouts. "These 3 sessions are the blueprint I built after I hit rock bottom. I offer them to you not as advice, but as an invitation." Silence. Then Lisa clapped once. Then the others followed. Rachel smiled. She didn't need the applause, but in that moment, it felt like a warm hug. They opened their worksheets. Page 1. Your financial starting line. A simple table. Income, fixed expenses, variable costs, debt, savings, if any, emotional triggers. Rachel guided them through it slowly. She didn't say, "Track every penny." She said, "Start where you are." She didn't say, "Cut your spending." She said, "Understand your patterns." Each person's pen scratched paper at a different rhythm. Lisa sighed audibly when she reached the deadline. Kenny tapped his pencil nervously at the income box. Rachel walked over quietly and whispered, "You're not behind. You're just starting." His shoulders relaxed. Then came the storytelling. Rachel shared her grocery log. Her monthly total, $98.43. What she ate, how she planned, why it worked. Layla chimed in. "She made me lentil stew once. Best thing I've eaten that cost under $2 a bowl." Laughter rippled through the room. Rachel moved to the whiteboard, wrote in large block letters, "You can't hate your life into financial peace." She underlined it. "Budgeting isn't about control," she said. "It's about kindness. It's about choosing how you spend your energy, not just your money." Then she added, "And kindness doesn't mean easy. It means clear." By the end of the hour, something had shifted. People weren't just nodding. They were asking, talking, comparing strategies. Kenny shared that he had 6 unused streaming subscriptions. Lisa confessed she grocery shopped when she was anxious. One of the women, her name was Grace, said she had never budgeted because she thought it was for rich people. Rachel laughed softly. "It's actually for tired people." The room nodded, because they were all tired. And now, they were also trying. When the session ended, no one rushed out. They lingered, asked questions, swapped emails. Layla handed Rachel a napkin with a doodle on it, a tiny stick figure holding a budgeting binder. "Your superhero logo," she joked. Rachel laughed so hard she nearly cried. She walked home with her thermos empty, her folder lighter, and her heart so full it felt like it might spill over. That night, she sat at her table, same wobbly chair, same soft light, and opened her journal. "Tonight I taught 6 people how to stop being afraid of their bank account. I showed them that peace is not for the privileged. It's for the persistent. And I did it with a borrowed coffee pot and a budget binder that cost $2 at a thrift store. I didn't monetize my story. I shared it. And I realized, sometimes purpose doesn't pay in dollars. It pays in dignity." She looked up at the candle burning beside her. Its wax melted slow, steady, like the months that had melted her old life into this one. Soft, simple, sacred. A few days later, Rachel received a message from the library staff. Someone asked if we could make your budgeting series a regular thing. "Would you consider running it again next month?" She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Yes, gladly." The sun was barely up, but Rachel was already awake. She didn't set an alarm anymore. Her body seemed to know when it was time to rise. And today felt significant in a way that didn't quite have words yet. She wrapped her thrifted cardigan tight around her and walked barefoot across the cool apartment floor. The city was still asleep. No buses rumbling by. No shouting on the sidewalk. Just the hush of pre-dawn and the soft hum of her fridge, which now only held food she knew she'd use. She made tea. The same tea she'd stretched for 3 weeks now, and settled in her corner chair. The one that creaked but cradled her like an old friend. Today marked 90 days since the layoff. 3 months. A single quarter. And yet it felt like an entire lifetime had passed. She opened her journal, the same one she'd been writing in since the week everything changed, and flipped to a blank page. She didn't title it. She just began. I used to track numbers. Now I track meaning. She paused, took a sip, and wrote more. I used to see budgeting as subtraction, what I couldn't have, what I had to give up, what others got to enjoy while I sat on the sidelines. But now I see it as clarity, as making space. And not just space in my budget, space in my life. The words poured out, not like a chore but like a release. She was writing her own version of a balance sheet, but for her soul. Not assets and liabilities in the traditional sense, but truths, markers of transformation. She flipped to a fresh page and drew 2 columns. At the top, she wrote, before on the left, now on the right, and began listing. Before, checked bank balance through fingers. Ate out to avoid loneliness. Spent to feel competent. Hid unopened mail under couch cushions. Assumed people with money were just better at life. Measured self-worth in productivity. Let silence feel like failure. Now, track every dollar without fear. Cook for comfort, not control. Spend intentionally, not emotionally. Open every bill with clarity. No wealth doesn't equal wisdom. Measure self-worth in honesty. Let silence feel like peace. She stared at the list, not with pride, but with awe. It was the kind of change that didn't make headlines. The kind of change that didn't show up in before and after photos. But it was real, tangible, earned, like muscle-built 1 penny, 1 soup pot, 1 spreadsheet at a time. Later that morning, she headed out for her Sunday walk. A ritual now. Her weekly reset, she called it. She passed by the dollar store, the bakery that always smelled like cinnamon, the old laundromat where she'd once taped up flyers about her budgeting group. She took the long route, the one that led past the community garden. As she passed the chain-link fence, she saw a familiar figure bent over a row of green stalks. "Marco," she called out. Her uncle looked up, squinting in the light. "Mija." Just in time. She pushed the gate open and stepped inside. Rows of vegetables, some still dew-kissed, stretched out before her like a quiet triumph. Marco pulled off his gloves. "Help me pull these," he said, nodding toward the carrots. Rachel knelt beside him. They worked in silence for a while, the satisfying crunch of soil giving way, the earthy scent of growth. Then he asked, "How's it going?" She smiled. "Better than expected. Not easy, but better." Marco nodded. "You seem lighter." "I am." He handed her a small bundle of freshly cut cilantro. "Then I guess the garden's not the only thing blooming." As they rinsed the carrots under the garden spigot, Rachel shared her workshop idea, the budgeting classes, the side hustle, the vision of something small but scalable. Marco listened, nodding slowly. "You ever think about teaching at the community center?" he asked. "They've got grant money. Sometimes they'll even pay you a stipend." Rachel blinked. "I thought that was just for nonprofits." "It is. But if you write a simple proposal and partner with an org, they'll back you." He wiped his hands on his jeans. "You've got something real, Rach. Something useful. People are drowning out there. You're giving them a ladder." She didn't speak for a moment. The idea of taking her story public, more public, was terrifying, but also thrilling, because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about who she'd become, and what that woman might now be capable of. That night, she went home and wrote a draft. Workshop proposal, community resilience through budgeting. She outlined the mission. Teach practical, shame-free budgeting to low-income and laid-off individuals in the neighborhood. She listed modules. Estimated attendance. Supply costs. She didn't know if it would go anywhere. Didn't know if the email would even get read. But she sent it. Because growth meant stepping into rooms she once thought were off-limits. Later, as she stood in her kitchen stirring lentils, she opened the envelope Marco had given her 3 weeks earlier. In case of fire or a dream. The bills were still there. She took out $100 and placed it in a new envelope. Wrote on it, "Workshop Fund, seed money." And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine something she hadn't since the layoff. The future. Rachel was halfway through folding a load of laundry when she saw the notification. A soft chime from her laptop, open on the kitchen table. She glanced toward it, expecting nothing. Maybe a coupon email, maybe another newsletter she forgot to unsubscribe from. But what she saw made her pause. Subject: Your proposal. We're interested. Her fingers hovered in the air, laundry forgotten. She walked over slowly, heart racing like she'd sprinted through the hallway. She clicked. It was from the director of the local community education program. Short, direct, no frills. "Rachel, thank you for submitting your proposal. Your approach is fresh, human, and deeply needed right now. We'd love to speak with you further about offering your budgeting workshops as part of our fall community empowerment series. Small stipends are available. Can we set up a meeting this week?" She read it once, then again, then a third time, slower. Not just accepted, welcomed. Rachel didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just exhaled, long and slow, then whispered into the quiet apartment. They said yes. Later that night, she sat in front of her budget board, slowly erasing the she'd drawn beside next month's income projections. Next to side hustle, workshops, she wrote a marker. TBD, but it's happening. It wasn't about the money. Not yet. The stipend was small. It was about validation. Not the internet kind. Not likes. Not applause. But real, grown woman respect. Professional recognition for something she built from her own story, her own brokenness, her own healing. For so long, her life had been a series of debts to pay off. Now it felt like she was beginning to earn forward. She spent the next 3 days preparing for the meeting. Not obsessing. Not overcompensating. Just preparing, with care. She revised her lesson plans, created cleaner PDFs, practiced her pitch while walking loops around her neighborhood. She even borrowed a blouse from Danny for the Zoom call. It had a small chip and one button, but she stitched it herself. Thread matching the fabric, so precisely you'd never notice unless you were looking for flaws. Rachel knew all about that. People always looking for flaws in women who weren't polished. She decided not to hide from it anymore. The meeting was short, 23 minutes. The director, a calm-voiced woman named Sheila, listened without interruption, asked 2 thoughtful questions, then smiled and said, "You're the kind of person we want in our program." That sentence echoed for hours. Rachel had replayed job interviews in her head where she fumbled, where she got ghosted, where she never even made it to the final round. Now she had said less, but meant more. Because this time, she wasn't pretending. She wasn't selling some curated LinkedIn version of herself. She was standing in the truth of who she had become. That evening, Rachel sat down and made a new chart. Things I did that no one applauded, but changed everything. Tracking expenses for 90 days straight. Saying no to 12 unnecessary purchases. Fixing the sink herself. Asking a neighbor to split groceries. Sharing soup with strangers. Decluttering 75% of her belongings. Walking instead of driving. Starting a workshop with 6 people. Saying, "I'm not okay," and meaning it. Saying, "I'm okay now," and meaning it even more. She stared at the list, then added one more. Believe my story was valuable, even when no one asked to hear it. The next morning, she received another message. This one from Kenny, the college kid from her workshop. "Hey Rachel, just wanted to say I started a budget and realized I've been spending $48 per month on stuff I didn't even use. Cut it. Put that money toward paying down my school debt instead. Thanks for showing me I didn't have to be rich to get organized." She replied with a simple, "Proud of you. Keep going." Then added his name to her notebook. People who remind me why I started. So far, the list was short. Kenny, Layla, Lisa, herself. But it was growing. And growth doesn't need speed, just direction. That weekend, Rachel visited her mother. They sat on the balcony, sipping cafecito, watching birds flutter in the late afternoon light. Her mother, never one for excessive praise, listened as Rachel shared about the workshop expansion, the stipend, the feedback. Then she nodded, eyes shining but lips firm. "You're not who you were, Rachel. You didn't just survive this. You rewrote what surviving even means." Rachel swallowed hard. Then her mother added, almost like an afterthought, "Your abuela would have laminated your budget board and taped it to the fridge." They both laughed. But later that night, back home, Rachel actually did it. She laminated her newest board and taped it to the fridge. Then she cooked, not just for sustenance, but as a kind of celebration. Black bean tacos with cilantro slaw, a meal that cost $2.17 to make by her last count and could feed her for 3 days. As the spices sizzled and the tortillas warmed, she remembered something she once heard in a podcast. The way you feed yourself is the way you tell the world you want to live. She plated the tacos carefully, lit a candle, sat at her table, alone but never lonely. And before taking her first bite, she whispered, "This is enough. This is more than enough." That night, she updated her new life plan doc. Under the section titled Milestones That Prove It's Working, she added, "Paid all bills on time this month. Said no to self-doubt. Someone asked me to teach them. Someone paid me to teach them. I'm not afraid of the end of the month anymore." She fell asleep with her window open, the summer breeze drifting through. No panic, no midnight math, no ghost of unpaid balances. Just a soft, steady breath, in and out, like the tide returning to shore. The direct deposit hit at 7:02 a.m. Rachel was sitting at her corner table, tea steeping in her thrifted mug, when the notification blinked onto her screen. Plus $216.00. Her first paycheck from the community center. Not much, by corporate standards. Less than half of what she used to make in a single day at her old job. But this paycheck didn't come from pretending to be someone else. It came from her story, from her workbook, from strangers nodding and folding chairs while she reminded them that budgeting wasn't punishment. It was power. Rachel let the numbers sink in, then smiled softly. It was her first ethical paycheck. That's what she called it in her journal later. The first time I got paid, without compromising my peace. She had already mapped out the money. $30 to groceries, $40 to the emergency fund, $50 toward the credit card, $20 to utilities, $15 to print new handouts, and $61 left. She let it sit there, not burning a hole, not begging to be spent, just resting, because money didn't scare her anymore. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a secret. It was a tool, and she finally knew how to hold it. That afternoon, she walked to the corner market and bought lentils, tortillas, garlic, bananas, and her small indulgence, a bag of ground cinnamon. She had run out last month and hadn't replaced it. But today, she could. A $2.49 decision. Once a guilt-ridden splurge, now an act of quiet abundance. She carried the bag home in both hands, smiling like she held treasure. Back in her apartment, she unpacked each item slowly, carefully, lined them on the counter like a still life painting. The promise of meals, of flavor, of enough. Then, with the sun filtering through the window, she opened her meal map, notebook, and started sketching out the week. She had names for some of the meals now. Recovery rice, brown rice with black beans, cumin, frozen spinach, and garlic. End of week stew. Whatever was left, boiled into comfort. Clarity oats. Oats with cinnamon and banana, eaten slowly, in silence, while journaling. None of it came from a cookbook, but all of it came from care. That evening, Danny came over. She brought a bag of stale baguette slices and a Tupperware of tomato soup she had made in bulk. Rachel smiled. "We're so broke it's cute," she joked. Danny laughed. Cute and debt-free, hopefully. They sat on the floor, backs against the couch, sharing soup and stories. Danny had picked up a few shifts at a local art gallery. Not steady work, but enough. "I started using your grocery log," she said. "It's weird. I feel richer now, even though I technically have less." Rachel nodded. "You feel in charge. That's the difference." They clinked mugs like wine glasses. "To cinnamon," Rachel said. "To spreadsheets," Danny replied. They laughed until they cried. The next morning, Rachel added a new page to her journal. Things that cost less than $5 but changed everything. Cinnamon, a thrifted budget binder, a notebook and 2 pens, a used lamp, a bag of rice, a handwritten sticky note that read, "Start where you are." She stared at the list for a while, then added, "Peace of mind isn't expensive. It's just inconvenient for capitalism." She underlined it twice. That Sunday, Rachel held her 4th workshop. 9 people this time. Word had spread. There were people of all ages, a high school senior, a grandmother, a 30-year-old gig worker who came straight from a delivery shift. She printed more worksheets, wore the same blouse, brought peanut butter oatmeal bars to share. She no longer apologized for being unqualified. She opened the class by saying, "I don't have a finance degree, but I survived paycheck-to-paycheck panic, built a $600 emergency fund from scratch, and haven't cried about rent in 2 months. So maybe I can offer you something real." They clapped, and this time, she let herself receive it. Not deflect it, not downplay it. Just accept the fact that maybe, just maybe, this thing she had built was working. After class, one of the students, an older man named Curtis, stayed behind. He stood awkwardly by the door as she packed up her things. "Hey," he said, "I wanted to ask, do you ever do one-on-ones?" Rachel blinked. "Like coaching?" He nodded. "I don't want anything fancy. I trust you." She thought for a moment, then said, "Let me think about how to offer that in a way that stays simple and honest and sustainable." He smiled. "That's why I asked." She walked home buzzing, not from ambition, but from alignment. She wasn't scaling. She wasn't branding. She wasn't chasing growth for its own sake. She was staying small and strong. And that was the most radical choice of all. That night, Rachel opened her workshop fund envelope and slipped in another $20. She was saving for something she hadn't fully named yet. Maybe a second-hand projector. Maybe space rental. Maybe a zine printing run. It didn't matter what. Not yet. What mattered was that now, she had a reason to save toward joy, not just fear. Before bed, she updated her financial tracker. It took her 5 minutes. She smiled at the simplicity of it. This act that once felt like punishment had become a kind of meditation. Line by line, week by week, she was becoming someone new. Not richer, but freer. And as she lay in bed, listening to the hum of her small, quiet apartment, she whispered, "I'm not climbing anymore. I'm cultivating." The letter was from her bank. Rachel had seen the envelope sitting in her mailbox and felt the familiar jolt of anxiety rise. A muscle memory from a time not so long ago, when anything from a financial institution spelled trouble. Fees, overdrafts, warnings. But today, she held the envelope without panic. She walked it inside her apartment, set it on the counter, made tea, and then opened it slowly with calm fingers. It was an update on her credit card. "Your payment history has improved your credit score by 43 points. No big announcement. No gold star. Just a quiet number. A signpost on the road she had been walking." Rachel stared at it, then laughed. Not a loud laugh, but a knowing one. Not because the score itself mattered, but because there was a time when she couldn't even look at it. She picked up her journal, the same one she'd started 3 months ago in a fog of fear, and turned to a blank page. At the top, she wrote, "Things I no longer fear," and then, one by one, listed them. Opening mail, checking my bank account, saying no to plans I can't afford, wearing the same outfit 3 times, grocery shopping on a budget, being seen as frugal, asking for help, starting again, being quiet, being still. She stared at the last one for a while, because stillness had once felt like failure, like doing nothing while the world moved forward without her. Now, stillness felt like a gift, a resource she had once wasted, a resource she had now mastered. Later that day, Rachel met Layla for their monthly Frugal Friends Friday walk. What started as a shared grocery run had turned into a ritual. Once a month, they'd meet, walk to the community garden, swap stories, and compare grocery hauls. They didn't call it accountability. That felt too formal. They called it holding each other up. Today, Layla was beaming. "I made my own all-purpose cleaner last week. Vinegar, lemon peels, a few drops of tea tree oil." Rachel grinned. "Look at you, domestic alchemist." They passed a block of closed storefronts, remnants of post-pandemic business fallout. Rachel paused. "That used to scare me," she said, nodding toward a shuttered cafe. The idea that everything could disappear. That one wrong move, and I'd be nothing. Layla stopped beside her. "And now," Rachel said slowly, "I know that even when it all falls apart, you can build something else. Maybe smaller, maybe slower, but stronger." Layla looped her arm through Rachel's. "You didn't fall apart, Rachel. You melted down and reforged." Back at home, Rachel pulled out her binder and updated her debt tracker. She had paid off another $200 this month. The numbers were small, but the movement was real. She drew a small star beside the new total and wrote, "Momentum matters more than perfection." That evening, she made soup. Not out of scarcity, but out of rhythm. Onions, lentils, carrots, garlic. A bay leaf from the jar her mother gave her. The smell filled the apartment with something richer than food: continuity. She poured a bowl, sat at the table, and opened a new document on her laptop. Title: The Small Steps Workbook, a guide to rebuilding with less. She wasn't launching a brand, not starting a course, not monetizing a pain story. She just wanted to write something someone else could print at home, hold in their hands, and say, "This is where I start." She began with the first line. "This is for anyone who has ever stared at a number and felt shame. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not behind." She wrote for 2 hours. Not for likes, not for a platform, but for purpose. Because she had walked through the fire, and now she wanted to build bridges. Later that night, she looked around her apartment, noticed the quiet, the order, the intentionality in every corner. She didn't miss the stuff she used to own. The impulse purchases, the subscription boxes, the piles of clutter meant to soothe but only ever suffocated. She missed none of it, because what had taken its place was hers. Self-made, simple, sufficient. She turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and let the days settle like dust in a sunbeam. Gently, quietly, permanently. The alarm buzzed at 6:45 a.m. But Rachel was already awake. She didn't need it anymore. Her mornings had become so steady, so lovingly predictable, that her body knew the rhythm before the clock did. She rose quietly, wrapped herself in her threadbare gray robe, the one her mom gave her in college, and shuffled into the kitchen. Tea first, then oats, then notebook. The ritual had become its own kind of faith. Not flashy, not Instagrammable, just real. She sat at her table, the steam from her mug rising in the golden morning light, and opened to the same page she always started with on Fridays. What I did this week that aligned with who I want to become. She paused, smiled, and began. Walked to the library instead of driving, saved gas, felt calm. Paid off another $100 toward credit card. Said no to 2 tempting but unnecessary online sales. Cooked every meal this week. No takeout. Read before bed instead of scrolling. Hosted soup night for Danny and Nina. Made my bed every morning. Slept 7+ hours every night. Didn't spiral once about money. 9 small lines. Each one a thread in the fabric of the new life she had sown. Each one a reminder that growth isn't a moment. It's a pattern. After breakfast, she opened her laptop and checked her workshop email. 5 new signups. 3 messages with budgeting questions. One from a woman named Fatima. "I used your grocery log and got my weekly total down to $42. I cried in the parking lot. Happy tears. Thank you for reminding me that dignity is in the details." Rachel blinked hard. She reread it. Twice. Then whispered, "Yes. That's it. That's exactly it." Later that afternoon, Rachel walked to the park with her binder tucked in her tote. It wasn't for a workshop. It wasn't for a class. It was just for her. She had started taking herself on what she called budgeting dates. An hour every Friday in the park, cafe, or library, where she reviewed her spending, updated her savings, and realigned her goals. No pressure. No shame. Just gentle curiosity. She sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree. The binder open across her lap, calculator beside her. She flipped to her monthly review. Income, $1,014. Expenses, $892. Savings, $122. Debt payment, $160. Still not a surplus by most standards. But for Rachel, it was a miracle of margin. The kind of breathing room she used to believe belonged only to people in another tax bracket. Now it was hers, because she had fought for it. Not with hustle, but with discipline. Not with luck, but with strategy. While reviewing her spending check-in page, she caught herself smiling. The biggest expense of the month. Printing handouts for her workshops. The second, groceries, still under budget. She hadn't bought clothes. Hadn't eaten out. Hadn't made a single impulse purchase. And yet, she felt full. Emotionally fed. Financially steady. There had been no emergency this month. No midnight panic. No, maybe I'll just use the credit card this once moment. That was the miracle. On her way home, Rachel passed by a high-end boutique she used to visit. Not often, but enough to remember the fluorescent guilt of walking out with a paper bag full of things she didn't need, just to feel worthy. She stopped and looked at the window. Beautiful mannequins. Price tags that screamed exclusivity. She watched a woman her age swipe her card at the counter. Rachel didn't feel envy. She felt clarity, because she knew something now. The clothes wouldn't fix it. The spending wouldn't soothe it. The appearance of abundance had never delivered the feeling of enough. She turned away, smiled, and walked on lighter. Back home, she updated her wall. The sticky notes had grown. They now stretched from the budget board to the edge of her bookshelf. Quotes, milestones, new affirmations, old ones rewritten. She added a new one, written in blue ink. Ritual builds resilience. And next to it, this life is small on purpose, so I can fit inside it fully. That evening, she lit her single candle and made recovery rice again. This time, with a dash of that cinnamon she loved. A twist she'd learned from her grandmother. As she stirred, she thought about how far she'd come. Not in miles, not in salary, but in sovereignty. She had cut her expenses by 70%. Not to suffer, but to simplify. Not to shrink, but to sharpen. And in doing so, she had expanded her peace in ways she never thought possible. After dinner, she pulled out her journal and titled the page, "The version of me I can finally trust." And she wrote. She says no when she needs to. She opens the mail without flinching. She reads her bank statement like a story she's writing. She remembers what she already has before chasing more. She builds a life she wants to come home to, and then honors it. She is not afraid of ordinary days. In fact, she prays for them now. Rachel set the pen down, looked around her apartment, the soft light, the small bookshelf, the nearly empty sink, and she whispered, "I'm not rebuilding. I'm becoming." It started with a knock on the door. A soft, uncertain knock. Not rushed, not expected. Rachel looked up from her notebook. The candle on the table flickered. The spreadsheet on her laptop screen waited quietly for her to return. She stood slowly, wiped her hands on her sweatshirt, and walked to the door. When she opened it, she saw a teenage girl, maybe 16, fidgeting with a folded flyer. "Are you the budgeting lady?" the girl asked. Rachel blinked. A pause, then a smile. "I guess I am." Her name was Eliza. She lived 3 floors down. Her older brother had picked up Rachel's flyer from the community board last month and left it on the kitchen counter. "I've been following your grocery log," Eliza said, shifting awkwardly in place. "I even made your lentil thing." Rachel smiled. "Did you like it?" "I mean, it was food. But yeah." Eliza laughed. Then her voice dropped. "I didn't know you could feel proud after shopping. I usually just feel like I messed up again." Rachel's chest tightened. She stepped aside and motioned her in. They sat at the table, the same table where Rachel had rebuilt her life, one spreadsheet, one spoonful of soup, one $2 one at a time. She poured tea, lit the candle, pulled out her binder, and said, "Let's start here." For the next hour, Rachel taught Eliza the same 3 things she always began with. Budgeting isn't about money. It's about awareness. A $5 meal that feeds you is more powerful than a $50 dinner that empties your account. And most importantly, you are not behind. You're just beginning. After Eliza left, with a printed copy of Rachel's workbook, a banana, and a promise to come back next Friday, Rachel sat quietly in her chair. It had happened again. Her story, once a wound, had become a doorway, and someone had walked through it. She stared at her budget board. The numbers weren't perfect. Still $5,000 in debt. Still counting every grocery dollar. Still reusing Ziploc bags. Still saying no to dinners out, upgrades, new clothes, convenience. But also, still at peace. Still in control. Still proud. That evening, Rachel opened her journal and wrote the final entry she would allow in that particular notebook. She wanted to end it right. Cleanly. Honestly. The top of the page read, "How I know I'm free, even on a tight budget." And below it, "Because I don't flinch when rent is due. Because I'm not embarrassed by my grocery cart. Because I light a candle every time I pay a bill, and I feel grateful instead of resentful. Because I can open my closet and see space. Because I don't measure value in how much something costs, but in how much it lasts. Because I have fewer things but more mornings that feel like mine. Because I can tell someone, honestly, what my bank account looks like and not feel ashamed. Because I have rituals that protect me from panic. Because stillness no longer feels like laziness. It feels like truth. Because when someone else is struggling, I don't scroll past them. I offer a workbook. I offer soup. I offer silence that holds instead of judges. Because even if I never earn six figures, I am no longer afraid of $6. She closed the journal, tied the elastic band around it, held it in both hands for a moment, pressed it to her chest. Then she stood, walked to the shelf, and slid it next to her laminated budget board, her debt tracker binder, and the first flyer she ever posted on the community board, now yellowed at the edges. The next morning, the sun broke over the skyline in the way it always did, quietly, without permission. Rachel opened her window, let the breeze in, and stood barefoot on her kitchen tile. She poured her tea, topped her oats with cinnamon, sat in her chair, and opened a fresh journal. Blank page. Blank start. But not from loss. From arrival. Later that day, she hosted her 5th workshop. 12 people came. One brought banana muffins. Another brought their teenage son. Curtis returned and told the room, "I haven't missed a payment in 30 days. First time in a year." Rachel led them through the new workbook. The small steps method. Living within, not just within means. They laughed, shared, cried quietly. And when the workshop ended, no one rushed out. They stayed. Just like that very first session. Stay to ask, to reflect, to feel less alone. After the last participant left, Rachel sat in the empty room. The chairs were crooked. The whiteboard smudged. Crumbs on the floor. But it felt holy, like something sacred had happened. She whispered to the room, "Thank you," and meant it. That night, she walked home slowly, lightly, a small paycheck in her bag, a binder tucked under her arm, a head full of stories, and a heart wide enough now to carry them all. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and exhaled. This wasn't survival anymore. This was self-made stability. She flipped the light on and looked around. No clutter, no chaos, just space. Her walls were bare. Her kitchen was humble. Her life was still small, but it was hers. Every inch of it built not on shame or debt or performance, but on truth. And she knew, in her bones, that even if the rug got pulled out again, even if another layoff came, another emergency, another loss, she had something now that no employer, no market crash, no bill could ever take. Agency, clarity, dignity, epilogue, gentle call to action, voice of the narrator. She didn't get rich. She didn't go viral. She didn't build an empire. She built something smaller, stronger, sustainable. She built a life she could afford and learned that simplicity is not the absence of success. It's the presence of purpose. And if you're starting from zero, from chaos, from shame, know this. You're not failing. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just becoming. Start where you are and take one step, then another. Small, steady, sovereign. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Rachel's quiet rebuild, then take one small step today. Start your budget. Open your bank app. Light a candle when you pay a bill. Remind yourself, you're not failing. You're becoming. And if you need a guide, we're here every Saturday, dollar by dollar, step by step. Green Square, subscribe for more stories that show how real people rebuild their lives with less and end up with more.